Alright, well hello again everyone and welcome out. This is Ankit from Maverick Currencies here, and this is a quick video on the Canadian dollar outlook. As you have seen, the Canadian dollar has done remarkably well in the past few months. I mean, this year, along the lines of US dollar, the Canadian dollar has actually held really well, considering this is one of those growth currencies. I mean, we have seen a huge outperformance there. So the question really is, at this point, is the Canadian dollar move down, or is there more further upside? One of the things you can see on this chart over here, that there is actually some rate hikes that have taken place throughout this year, and that has actually lifted up the Canadian dollar to new highs. So each window is a rate hike. And if you look at the pattern over here, that we have been going up each time we get this little rate hike. At this point in this past rate hike, which was again the most hawkish, with 1% move, which we haven't really seen other central banks do, and that was actually did not really make the Canadian dollar go higher. So the question really at this point is the Canadian dollar move done? And early this week, and on Monday, it almost looks like Canadian dollar was ready to roll. I mean, if you see this little upward trend line over here, we have seen every pullback has been able to rally, but we have stayed above the 20, the 50-day moving average. Now, at this point, we actually, for the first time, we actually gave below that moving average. So we have seen a nice little bounce back up, and now we actually retested the resistance, or this 20-day moving average. So the question really at this point in this technical setup here, is this a bear rally, or is this one of these little pullbacks to buy into? So if we just take a look at this chart, I mean, we actually rejected that 20-day moving average very nicely. So we are getting a bit more of a tail end on this. So one of the things that the Canadian dollar has been difficult to trade with, especially if you're trying to get a pullback, is that you get this move down and it actually quickly got bought out. So each time you try to call for actual reversal, this really hasn't resulted into it. And I know a lot of traders that pay attention to correlations. You know, one of the correlations that we pay attention to is the commodity, is the oil. Now, if you take a look at oil, and oil has actually made a huge turn. I mean, early this year. I mean, if you look at this past few months, we actually peaked back in early June. So for the last 2 months, the oil market has actually been downtrending. I mean, we did pull back, we had a bear rally, and then since then we have been actually moving lower. So the trajectory is actually on the downside for the US oil. But if you really use that correlation, notice that it's not really followed the same path. So CAD's not really following the exact same path, where early this year, I mean, there was for a time period where we saw very similar movements. But I mean, as you can see, that these things are not always correlated perfectly, and right now what you have is a negative, or the deviation from its correlation. So at this point, we can look at the oil prices and we can see that the oil prices are actually hitting new lows, but the Canadian dollar is not really that much affected by it. So what's really keeping the Canadian dollar strong? And again, this has a lot to do with the central bank. The Bank of Canada has actually done a good job at keeping their currency strong, and they actually have been one of those hawkish central banks. So the only thing that would really change the trajectory and the outlook on the Canadian dollar is if the central banks start to back off, or if the economic numbers start to weaken as well. So far, we haven't really had negative numbers from Canadian economy. So I mean, if the economy is doing well, the central bank is there to support it. I mean, we are actually seeing a perfect scenario for it. But this is where I want to bring the attention to a 4-hour chart. So as you can see that I've drawn this little trend line over here on the CAD, and you can see that this is for the first time CAD looks like it wants to kind of go lower. So it actually broke this little trend line that we have been very much intact for the most part since March. So this time we did break that support, and we did break the 20 and 50 moving average, and you can see a nice little bounce back. So this bounce back, I think, could be a precursor for a shorting opportunity. So if you're trying to decide if this is a point we roll over, I think the risk to reward make a whole lot of sense to use the resistance as your stop. And look at this rally, which has been a nice little powerful rally that we've seen here, could easily roll over as well. So in the next coming days, this is something I'm paying close attention to and see if the CAD actually rolls over. And if it does, it will give us a confirmation that this CAD move is actually coming to an end. We've seen a regime change and maybe the money will start flowing somewhere else, and which we haven't really seen for since March. So this is the one thing that we are paying close attention to. So what pairs actually looks the best with this case scenario? I mean, CAD yen, from a technical standpoint, looks a very good picture as well. On a daily chart, you can see that it actually in this uptrend here, we've seen a pretty dramatic move in the yen in the past few days, and we're seeing a bit of a relief rally right here. And now we are seeing this could just be a turning point and see this actually rolls over. We can also pay attention to other Canadian dollar crosses like to its counterparts like CADJPY, which we have seen in the past month or so. The CADJPY is actually stronger than the CAD. Clearly hasn't really made a bigger move, but I think overall we can see what we started to notice is that the CAD is actually not so strong since July. So we are seeing the CAD actually making some sort of turn here. And if you take a look at CAD, AUDCAD, CAD, paying attention to other CAD crosses, I mean, we might not get the best pairing with the dollar CAD since they're very similar. So you have to kind of see where the money's coming out of and where it is going into. In currency market, the money flow has to go somewhere. So if it's not the CAD that's going to make a move, what other currency that might be the best pairing? I mean, it's clearly not the euro. Euro is falling all the way down. Swiss franc is holding it much better. So it really leaves us with a very few options, which could be just the yen, or maybe the dollar, or even Aussie and Kiwi. Actually, I like those pairings because we are noticing some sort of relative strength that's coming in. And I think let's say if the Kiwi basket can break out, I think those Kiwi CAD and Aussie CAD would actually make a good pairing for the longer term. I mean, you can see that there's a big correction since March, from 87 down to 80. So there's a 700 pip move that could have a sort of a recovery rally coming in. So Kiwi CAD, I mean, those are the pairs I like. If the Swiss franc stays strong, we can also pay attention to CAD Swiss franc as well, especially if it gives up this level of that 200-day moving average. And also I want to pay attention to dollar CAD as well, because if you take a look at it, dollar CAD, this has actually had the tightest correlation throughout the year, and we haven't really seen a big deviation. Let's say if the dollar stays strong and the CAD start to pull back, I think this will make an interesting point for dollar CAD to actually finally make that break higher above that 130 level. But at this point, the technicals looks very choppy. So the good thing to do is just to take a look at the CAD basket and see if this rollover, or if this little bear rally, and does it roll over? And if it does, I think that will be your initial confirmation that the Canadian dollar actually wants to move lower. And your job at that point is just to pair up the Canadian dollar against something that's actually performing the best. Thanks for watching, and see you guys in the next update. Cheers.